Hello and welcome to another episode of Curious Cat Crime Sunday with Shelby. And today's episode is going to be on Bobby Greenlease. And please remind future Shelby to make the video with the mic on. Again, made another video with the mic off. Okay, let's get to it. On September 28, 1953, a woman knocked on the door of the Notre Dame des Zions, excuse me if I said it wrong, in Kansas City, Missouri. And this was a school, and when the nun answered, the lady had said that she was the aunt of Bobby Greenlease, a 6-year-old at the school, and that his mother had suffered a bad heart attack and she needed to take him to see her. However, this was not Bobby's aunt, nor did his mom have a heart attack. Bonnie Emily Heedy had just kidnapped the son of a very wealthy car dealer. It's every parent's worst nightmare, but what happens next is way worse. The plan, masterminded by Heedy's lover, Carl Austin Hall, was to extract a significant sum of money from worried parents, $600,000 to be exact. Now, mind you, this is in 1953, so it's a lot now, let alone back then. This was to be in exchange for the boy's safe return. However, the two never planned on keeping their end of the bargain. After driving Bobby away, talking about pets, and even getting him ice cream, the trio continued to a farm in Kansas, where Carl, who considered the boy evidence that needed to be destroyed, had taken him at point-blank range and shot him, killing him, unfortunately. But that didn't stop Carl or Heedy from cashing in. After a week of 15 phone calls and over a half-dozen ransom notes, sending Greenlease's family on a wild goose chase, the two eventually got their loot. Hall then promised to send a note explaining how to pick up the boy. However, unlike the other notes, this one was never sent. It all seemed to go off without a hitch until, after picking up the ransom on October 5th, they ended up with no plan of what to do next. Both Hall and Heedy, who extreme alcoholics and could not start their day without a drink, drove 380 miles to St. Louis and rented an apartment. When Heedy passed out, Hall put $2,000 in her purse and left. By enlisting the help of a cab driver, a prostitute, and copious amounts of alcohol, Hall may have been a bit too freely giving of his newly acquired money, leading the cab driver to explain the suspicious cab fare to the St. Louis Police Department. On October 6th, officers arrested Hall. The FBI was notified and quickly tied him to the kidnapping. Hall gave up Heedy, who was arrested the same night. The Bureau had been involved in the investigation since the beginning. An extensive investigation not only led to the recovery of Robert Cosgrove Greenlease Jr.'s body in a grave on Heedy's property in St. Joseph, Missouri, but also resulted in dozen pages of confessions. Excuse me, cat. Of confessions and, indisputable evidence. Hall and Heedy were not only tried and convicted, but just over an hour of deliberating from the jury, were sentenced to death for the crime. As Judge Albert L. Reeves said of the case, "I think the verdict fits well. It is the most cold-blooded murder I have ever tried." On December 18, 1953, less than 3 months after the kidnapping of Bobby, Hall and Heedy were executed in the Missouri gas chamber. The Greenlease family never got their beloved son back, but thanks to the hard work of the FBI and its partners, justice was served. Carl Austin Hall, a once wealthy man who was accustomed to living a lavish lifestyle, began squandering away his inheritance. After he was arrested in 1951 for robbing a taxicab driver of a total of $33, which I'm assuming was probably more in that time. Although sentenced to 5 years of prison, he served just 2. And it was there that he began plotting his next get-rich scheme, a kidnapping ransom. After meeting Bonnie Heedy in a bar in 1953 and moving into the divorcee and sometimes prostitute a mere 2 days later. Hall let her in on his plan. She was more than willing accomplice, and which set a stage for a great unfortunate story of Greenlease, Bobby Greenlease. Little tidbit of information. The Federal Bureau of Investigations was not given jurisdiction to investigate child abductions until 1932. Can you imagine that? So before that, they were not given the ability to help search for these children. This was spurred in part by the kidnapping and murder of Charles Lindenberg's son by Bruno Richard Hauptmann, which I would like to do a case on one day. But contrary to popular belief, there does not need to be a ransom demand, and the child does not have to cross state lines or be missing for 24 hours before they go to work. Our Child Abduction Rapid Development, which is CARD, and our meaning FBI, teams are set to respond the movement of the FBI becoming involved in a kidnapping case, and the team, part of the Violent Victims Against what? Violent Crimes Against Children section, do everything possible to facilitate the safe return of a missing child, often in concert with their state laws and enforcement partners. So after a quick synopsis of the story, let's get into it a little deeper, okay? So this took place at approximately 10:55 a.m. on September 28, 1953, and it was the Sister Monrond, again, I'm probably saying it wrong, of the French Institute of Notre Dame des Sions, a school for small children in Kansas City, Missouri, answered the door and was confronted by a woman who said she was the aunt of Bobby Greenlease, as I stated. Robert Cosgrove Greenlease Jr., known as Bobby, was 6 years old and the son of Robert Cosgrove Greenlease Sr., a wealthy automobile dealer who resided in Missouri Hills, Kansas City, Missouri. A woman informed Sister Monrod that Bobby's mother had just suffered a heart attack and had been taken to St. Mary's Hospital, and the woman appeared visibly upset and apologized to Sister Monrod for her condition. Upon getting Bobby, Sister Monrod told him that his aunt had called at the school for him. She did not tell Bobby his mother had suffered a heart attack, which, to be honest, is probably good, considering he's a 6-year-old, and likely wouldn't understand. If he did, would be, like, completely just, I can't imagine. Sister Monrod remembered that Bobby walked directly to this woman without hesitation, and there was nothing in his action or behavior to indicate his doubt on the part that this woman was his aunt. Because I was curious myself when I was reading the first article. I'm like, why did he just go to her? Like, why would he go to this woman he doesn't know? But I guess he went as if he knew her. As the school woman left the school, she had an arm around Bobby's shoulder and was holding his hand. Sister Monrod last saw them as they entered a taxi cab. Didn't know this. At approximately 11:30 a.m. the day, the Sister Marthana, probably saying that wrong, I apologize, of the school called the Greenlease home to inquire of Miss Greenlease's condition, spoke to Miss Greenlease, and at the time learned that the story by the woman who called Bobby was false. Miss Greenlease immediately called her husband, who rushed home, and after hearing the story of what happened, notified the chief of police of Kansas City, who in turn reported the matter to the FBI. William Pearson Creech, the cab driver for the Toadman Car Company in Kansas City, sorry, I got stuck on that word, told authorities that shortly before 11 a.m. on September 28, 1953, a woman whose description fit the woman who called at the school entered the cab and requested him to drive her to the school of Notre Dame de Sion. Excuse me again if I'm saying it wrong. Upon arriving to the school, she told Creech to wait for her until she desired to be driven to the Katz drugstore at Westport and Main Street in Kansas City. In approximately 6 minutes, the woman re-entered the cab, accompanied by a small boy fitting the description of Bobby Greenlease. When Creech last saw them, they had stopped behind a blue 1952 to 1953 Ford sedan bearing Kansas license plate. Next, we're going to talk about the ransom. After a few hours of the kidnapping, the Greenlease received a first ransom letter concerning their concerning the return of their son. I almost said their future son. The first letter, mailed special delivery, postmarked 6 p.m. on September 28, 1953, demanded $600,000 in $20 and $10 bills to be placed in a duffel bag. The kidnappers promised Bobby's safe return in 24 hours as long as there were no tricks in delivering the money. The second ransom letter was postmarked 9:30 p.m. on September 29, 1953. Inside the envelope, in which was a letter that was mailed with the Jerusalem medal, which had been worn by Bobby Greenlease. The letter again contained demands for $600,000 and stated that Bobby was okay but homesick. Overall, the Greenlease received over a half dozen ransom notes and 15 telephone calls. The final communication between the Greenlease and the kidnappers was a telephone call received at 1 a.m. on October 5, 1953, at the Greenlease residence. The kidnappers stated they had received the $600,000 ransom money and assured the Greenlease that their son was alive and that he would return in 24 hours. Unknown to the family, the kidnappers, Carl Hall and Bonnie Heady, had killed the boy's son soon after abduction and buried the body near Heady's home in St. Joseph, Missouri. Then the two murderers took the ransom money and traveled approximately 380 miles to St. Louis, Missouri. I wonder why they say approximately when they say the same number every time. I don't know. Anyways, little side note. On October 5th, 1953, Hall purchased 2 metal suitcases and transferred the ransom money from the duffel bag to these suitcases, leaving the duffel bag in an ash pit in St. Lucie, Missouri. What? St. Lucie. Louis. Jeez. Sorry guys, I'm not awake yet. Carl Hall took Bonnie Heady, who was drunk, to an apartment he rented at Arsenal Street. Also in St. Louis, Heady immediately went to sleep, and Hall deserted her there. After leaving only $2,000 of the $6,000 ransom money in her purse. I'm pretty sure the other article I read had said, I have all my notes here, but like I said, I just woke up, so I'm a little out of it. But I'm fairly positive the other story said that Hall took $2,000 and left. But it seems more likely, instead, if you were gonna rob someone and leave, they have $600,000. They're probably not gonna only take $2,000. So it seems more likely, in my opinion, if I was a criminal, to take, what would that be, 598,000 of the ransom money and leave 2,000 to the girl. So I'm gonna go with this one. On October 6, 1953, Hall purchased 2 large garbage cans and a shovel, placed them in a rented car, and drove the Merrimack River, I may be saying that wrong, I'm likely saying that wrong, in St. Louis County, then where he intended to bury the ransom money. However, he couldn't find a suitable place. He left the cans in a deserted clubhouse and drove back to Coral Courts Motel, where he was staying. Hall became suspicious of persons in the vicinity of the motel during the afternoon of October 6, 1953, and moved to an apartment at the Townhouse Hotel. Townhouse Hotel? It's an interesting name. Anyways, that was in St. Louis. So, on to how authorities broke the case. A telephone call was received in the 11th District St. Louis Police Department at 3:30 p.m. on October 6, 1953, from John Oliver Hager, a driver in the Ace Cab Company in St. Louis. His information led to the arrest of Carl Austin Hall, who identified himself as John James Bryan, by officers of the St. Louis Police Department in the Townhouse Hotel. That catches me every time, I don't know why. In St. Louis during the evening of October 6, 1953. Later in the night, he led officers to an apartment on Arsenal Street, St. Louis, where Hall's girlfriend, Emily Heady, was taken into custody. Hall, interrogated by FBI agents and other law enforcement agencies several times after his arrest, empathetically insisted that partially all of the $600,000 ransom money was in his possession at the time he was arrested at the St. Louis Police Department. Hall admitted to FBI agents that the planning of the kidnapping and the actual abduction of the victim, to burying the body in the yard of Miss Heady's residence. Also, he admitted picking up ransom money but denied that he killed the victim. Just so you know, little side note, I make these videos in like little clips because my memory's not that great, and my camera is over on this screen, or my camera is right there, but my video part's right there. So if you see me look to the side, it's because I'm trying to stop the video. At the time, he implicated Tom Marsh, stating that he had turned the victim over to Marsh. Hall later admitted Marsh was a fictitious individual, and the only person involved with the kidnapping was Bonnie Heady and himself. It was not until October 11, 1953, that Hall admitted he and Bonnie Heady transported the victim to Kansas City, Missouri, to a point outside of Kansas City in Overland Park, Kansas, where Hall shot the victim to death. He then transported the body approximately 45 miles to St. Joseph, Missouri, where he buried it in Bonnie Heady's yard and planted flowers on the grave. Bonnie Heady admitted assisting Hall in the preparation of the ransom letter notes and the instructions to the Greenlease family concerning part payoff of the ransom, as well as going to school and obtaining the custody of the victim, using a ruse that his mother was ill. The boy's body was found by FBI agents at 8:40 a.m. on October 7, 1953, buried near the porch of Heady's residence at 1201 South 38th Street in St. Joseph, Missouri. The body was wrapped in a plastic bag, and a large quantity of lime had been poured over the bag. The Greenlease family dentist identified the body as that of Bobby Greenlease at 1:05 p.m. on October 7th, 1953. And man, is that terrible. They put him in bags. I mean, killing him is bad. I'm not saying that part's not bad, but I just imagine how small he must have been to put in bags. Bloodstains were found on the basement floor and the steps of Heady's residence, on a nylon blouse and fiber rug. Some .38 caliber shell casings were also found in the house. Those shell casings were examined by the FBI laboratory, and it was found to have been fired from a .38 caliber snub-nosed Smith & Wesson revolver in Hall's possession at the time of his arrest. The FBI laboratory also ascertained that a lead bullet recovered from a rubber floor mat in Plymouth station wagon owned by Bobby Heady was also fired by the Hall's .38 caliber revolver. The judgment. On October 30th, 1953, Carl Hall and Bonnie Heady appeared before Judge Albert L. Reeves in federal court in Kansas City, Missouri, at which time they entered pleas of guilty on the indictment. On November 19, 1953, after hearing the evidence, a jury of the federal court of Kansas City, Missouri, oh my gosh, this is hard to say, recommended the death penalty after only an hour and 8 minutes of deliberation. 15 minutes after the verdict was announced, Judge Reeves sentenced both of them to be executed on December 18, 1953. Judge Reeves said, "I think the verdict fits the evidence and is the most cold-blooded, brutal murder I have ever tried." And Carl Austin Hall, Bonnie Emily Heady were executed together in Missouri's lethal gas chamber at the state penitentiary in Jefferson City, Missouri, on December 18, 1953. Hall was pronounced dead at 12:12 a.m. Heady was pronounced dead 20 seconds later. After half of the 600,000 was never, over half of the 600,000 was never found. FBI investigation established that two suitcases, which reportedly contained the ransom money, which were in Hall's possession at the time of his arrest, were not brought to the 11th District Police Precinct as testified by the arresting officer, Lieutenant Louisa Ira Shoulders, and Patrolman Elmer Dolan. Does that mean they stole it? What? Yeah, both officers were subsequently federally indicted for perjury. Lieutenant Shoulders was convicted April 15, 1954, and sentenced to 3 years in prison for $600,000. Jeez. Patrolman Dolan was convicted in March 31st, 1954, and sentenced to 2 years. After they were released from prison, both returned to the St. Louis area. Shoulders died May 12, 1962. Dolan received a full pardon from President Johnson July  21st. That's my birthday. 1965. Sorry, I didn't mean to get excited about that. Little things, you know? Anyways, thank you so much for watching another episode of Curious Cat Crime Sunday with Shelby. I hope you enjoyed this story. Not that you enjoyed it, but that you enjoyed my storytelling, and that you have a great day. Remember, be good to each other and be safe. Bye.